Clap 3 times if you can hear me. It works with little kids and it works with adults. Wonderful. Thank you so much again for your time as we talked about inclusion. We're going to transition to this amazing lineup of creators that are sitting next to me. And I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy phone because I have some fun facts about them to share, because I know you can read their bios in the program, so we're just going to share some things that maybe you would never find in their bio. So with that, I want to first highlight Fernanda Frick. If you want to raise your hand, there you go. There you go. Hi. Fernanda, yeah. From Chile. Yeah. Fernanda's fun fact is that thanks to her first animation job when she was 14, her eyebrow turned white. Yeah. It's okay because it looks cool. Yeah. Thank you, Fernanda, for sharing that. We love that. That was the best fun. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Anyway, Solène? Yes. So her fun fact is that she only went to Russia once in her life for 3 days, but ended up in the same room with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, wow.
So you're going to get that story from her offline. But welcome, Solène. Hélène?
Yes.
Hélène.
Hélène, yes.
Hélène, perfect. My Spanish is helping. Here we go. Hélène, you said as a kid, I strongly believed that people had a limited amount of words they could say in their life. So you were always trying to have an economy of words and then save them for later.
Exactly. I didn't speak.
You were storing them up.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, you can use as many as you want today.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome, Hélène.
Thank you.
Yeah. Binhan?
Yeah.
Welcome. So you sent me a little bit of a story we're going to
Sorry
tell.
about
No, but
that,
I love it. So it's a slightly amusing fact about himself. He says, by 10th grade, he had a super strict and super ambitious music teacher for a few years who didn't respect anyone that didn't give him dedication in music class. He'd torture a lot of the other kids with his ambition, and most students, including me, hated it, is what you said. After a few years, his attitude towards you changed, and he didn't punish you as hard anymore and kind of left you alone.
Yeah.
After some time, it felt like a wonderfully relaxed gentleman's agreement. You wouldn't disturb class, instead having to actively participate, and he'd leave you alone and not give you too bad a grade. It took some time to realize why this change in behavior until you remembered a question he asked you offhand at some point randomly. He asked you, this whole painting and drawing thing, and later on filmmaking and comic thing, are you taking it seriously? Only then did you realize that he had accepted that when it came to the arts and that you were dedicated to something else, which was something he could finally respect, you think, which is pretty cool. There you go.
Yeah, afterwards we were very, very friendly with each other.
Yeah.
But sorry, had time to tell this story.
Yeah, no, we love it. No, please, a round of applause for Ben Han. Yeah. He won over his music teacher. And certainly last but not least is Fawn. Did you want to share a little bit of your fun factoid? I think it connects to one of our executive committee members. Yeah.
One of my sorry, I just flew in like last night.
Yeah, God
around
bless her.
midnight, so trying to think of the fun facts about myself.
You worked at, you started your career at 6 Point Harness, is that what I
Yes.
heard?
Yeah. Brendan's here.
Brendan's here, the president. There you go.
Thank you for the opportunity, Brendan.
There you go. It's full circle.
I guess fun facts about me, I was born Fawn, which is the same pronunciation in Thai means rain. And then I got sick as a baby, so my parents went to the Buddhist monk who gave them a couple choices of name, and I became Prasansuk. And when I moved over here, to United States, nobody can say Prasansuk, so I reverted back to Fawn. And I've been Fawn for 17 years ever since.
Oh, there you go, Fawn. Well, welcome, and it's wonderful to have you here. Perfect. So I kind of wanted to start us off, and the focus of today's panel is to really think about what does intersectionality, inclusion, and really the idea of being a creator in the animation industry mean to each of you today, especially as we all sort of represent the next generation of folks in this business. And I just wanted to start kind of by contextualizing each of you in terms of your own journey. So, and anybody feel free to start, but what inspired you to be interested in this industry? Was there a particular movie, character, person? Did you have an ugly Betty, you know, or was it something else? I say, you go. See?
I'll go. Okay. Whew, okay. If I don't make any sense, please stop me. I'm really not used to talking in front of that many people. It's funny because we choose this industry of drawing and animation so you don't have to express yourself verbally, and then you end up doing it anyway. So yeah, how do you start? I grew up with all the, of course, feature animations of Disney. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of TV as a kid, so it's really the feature film of Disney that shaped me. I found it amazing that you could like get an emotional connection like through all the storytelling that happened in there. A little later, I discovered, I don't know if any of you saw the Pink Floyd The Wall film. There's bits of animation section in it, and I realized how much, like with the flower sequence, a completely different way of expressing your ideas through drawing, and opened my mind a little bit. And later, of course, Michael Dudot has been a huge inspiration to see, like, with just the simple brush strokes, you can express so much and so much emotion. And this is like a reference that will always follow me through my work and career. But I wanted to emphasize on this particular story that I read. There was a picture book of a little boy and a monster. The story was basically the little kid like playing with this giant monster. The title of the book was called My Nightmare and Me. So you would follow him, like they would have like a lot of adventures in the book. Sorry for spoilers alert, but at the end of the book, you turn the page and you realize like the little kid is in coma, is in the hospital, and the monster represented the disease that he's dealing with. And I thought that was such a strong way of communicating ideas and stories. And this is really what made me want to continue in this industry, to really express these things. I get emotional when I speak about things, sorry. But yes, it's all like, and discovering more and more as you go, like all the variety that you have in animation. You have so many ways of expressing yourself. It's unbelievable. So I think we're very lucky to be able to be in this industry and express ourselves that way.
That was great. Yeah.
Well done.
Great job.
10 points.
Okay. I guess I got into this industry. I mean, it's like a cliche answer, but I never imagined myself doing anything else. Like when I was very little, I was drawing, and I imagined I wanted to be a Disney artist. I guess that I later realized that means to be an animator. But it wasn't until I saw like Spirited Away by Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli that I got obsessed with that movie. And because it was like this very spoiled little girl that had to learn and grow and start doing stuff for herself to improve. And I was obsessed with it. And I saw a making of the film. And I saw Miyazaki that would stay in the studio like till 3 in the morning, and he will like cook ramen for the entire studio and stuff like that. And I thought like, oh, so humans make animation, and I'm a human, so I can do it. And I was 13, and I downloaded a pirate copy of Flash and started animating. Let's say it was a trial version. Don't arrest me, please. And yeah, I started making films by then, after that.
Awesome. So that moment was Spirited Away, yeah.
When you ask who was your ugly Betty in your life, when you get to start your career, like, you know, I feel like everyone here probably grew up watching animation and loved the art of the films and stuff. And I grew up watching both Disney films and Japanese anime. That's just how it is in Thailand. But I never thought of it as a career. Like we didn't have the industry or even school when I was young. So it wasn't until I heard about the guy who went to my high school was working at Disney, and I was like, this is the strangest thing I've ever heard in my life. This person from the same country is working like so far away from home and have a career in it. And I still remember emailing him asking that if there's any female working the animation studio, because I have no framework of like how that job is. You don't have any examples. And my mom was like, it's art, I don't know if art is a real career. So because of that guy, Paitun Batana Sirintra, we got in communication. He looked at my portfolio, he recommended schools, and I was so grateful that he was there, and I was able to like get, see that I could be in that position too. So, yay.
That's awesome. You had someone in your real life, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, even if they're not the same gender.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't have one person or one movie in particular that inspired me to do this job. I started to draw really young to tell stories, and I didn't really think to do that as my job. I had other plans, and when I became teenager, after starting to read a lot of comics, but French graphic novels, and also with the arrival of Japanese animation of the 90s. I really started to get passion in it, and I thought that the best way to tell my stories was to go in the comic industry. So I did art school, and along the way I got kind of hijacked by animation. I started as an assistant storyboarder with no skills at all, and progressively, as I just managed to go up and up and up, I realized the magical and powerful side of cinema. So I'm not sure I will do a comic someday, maybe, but that's how it happened, and the drive for it was, from the beginning, was more like Tex Avery and this kind of animation, Don Bluth animation, with a really dark universe like Brisby, Charlie, the little dinosaur. Don't know the name in English, but it made me cry all the time. My mother was crazy with that. And then after, Japanese animation, and then more recently, it's more and more live-action movie. But that's how it happened.
Right on. So it was a style and an aesthetic and the connection.
Yeah, I wasn't too much into princesses because I couldn't identify myself with that. So I went for this kind of twisted character, twisted universe, or really twisted humor. So that was more I felt more comfortable in that.
Right on. Yeah. It's the friendliest audience ever.
Well, for me, it was like I didn't have that one defining eureka moment where I said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna do animation." For some strange reason, I grew up like with a deep love, and like I was really nerding out about animation, about comics, about drawing and painting. So when I answered my music teacher's question, then I was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of serious about it," but I never thought it could actually be a job. I always thought at some point I would have to do like a proper job. So I was like, yeah, maybe I'm gonna be a graphic designer or something. Or so I applied for Art Academy, and then I got rejected. So I said, man, okay, gotta do something else in between until I reapply next year. So I got into another university where they had this 3D program, this computer graphics program. And it was only then, so I would love comics and animation in video games, and only then, after I actually started to use some 3D software, I thought like, wait a moment, like, this could be a job? So just very, very late, I actually like these things that were already in my head all the time, that I connected them and said, I could actually do that, So yeah, it was very late in the game. It was not a one inspiring moment. It just very slowly creeped into me.
Yeah. And then you knew.
And now I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. You knew it was a job, and there we are.
Sorry.
You knew it was a job, that it could be a job.
Yeah, I knew it was a job. I knew exactly what kind of positions were there. I knew what the names of the Japanese animators were and such. But I never thought like, hey, I could actually do that,
You didn't watch like the making of, because I know I spent so many time watching the making of all the
No,
films.
I even watched the making ofs, but it's like I'm just like, oh, that's really interesting. Fantastic. Well, I never. Yeah, wasn't the smartest kid.
Not the theme we're going to take from this panel, everybody. But I really love what you shared because it was something different for each of you, whether it was an individual person or piece of content. It was a discovery of, I could actually do that. It was making of. A lot of Disney reference, which, by the way, I did not plant. Just, want to say that.
No.
Yeah. But I actually think it's also really interesting because we grew up in a generation where those making of videos did exist. The idea of it being exposed to us was a little bit different than maybe generations before us, which you might argue made a little bit of a difference for each of us. Whether or not it was something that we recognized right away was a place where we could go, or it came later, or it was a piece of content. But the sort of idea of that the industry itself was a bit more exposed once we were growing up, which I think is interesting in terms of our own worldview on the industry. And with that, about 75% of the global workforce in just a few years is going to be millennial or younger. We're becoming the sort of average age, if you will, within the business. We're becoming the sort of average employee, which is really interesting. And so I was wondering from any of you, do you think this is having an effect or will have an effect on the medium of animation or storytelling? And what are you seeing even starting to change in terms of the stories being told or even in your own work? Are you noticing even a shift in how you're working or what's happening around you in the business?
Well, there's two different ways, because there's the content of the stories,
Yep.
and then there's like the platform and the technique, how you talk about those stories. And I think it's evolving. They're both evolving like at the same time. And I think it's very interesting to explore all the new technological medium that we can use to like tell those stories. Thinking, of course, of VR, which is very innovative. In terms of storytelling, and also video games. I think this is where it's going to expand the most, where you can like completely immerse yourself in a world and interact with it. Also AR, it was very fun to see like even the Pokemon Go phenomenal, like everybody going outside. I haven't played, so I don't know, but I've seen all of my friends doing it, and it's crazy to see how people like love interacting like that. So in terms of, it's interesting to think like of the techniques as much as the story as well that you wanna say.
Yeah, so the technique mixing with the story. And
Yeah,
what is
with
that
story.
doing in the storytelling?
Yeah, stories will evolve as well, because like our way of communicating, our ways of communicating are changing as well. So this will also adapt. I think we're way more connected to the world, so there's like fastest change now. I remember like after doing my grad film, for instance, and having like answers right away from people like from like on the other side of the world in a different language, saying that they understand like what I wanted to talk about in my film, and like you relate way more to globally, on a global scale today, and I think that's really important to keep like communicating like that. Having like groups like, for instance, Late Night Work Club, where like people all over the world like work together on a common theme, or Loop to Loop. I don't know if any of you like try those little GIF loops like that you do on every month I think. Just to see the diversity like all in one place, like come together. I think this is like really what marks our generation.
Yeah, I think the emergence of internet is definitely like playing the big part, because you used to create content and there's a curator where your content can be seen. And now anyone can have an Instagram account and then draw a comic about whatever their reality is. And that's great, because you might not even hear about what people of different ages think just 10, 15 years ago. And now, immediate response. I found an artist who's only 13 years old, and I'm like, oh my God, they draw so well. And I definitely see it where I work, where we have a group of younger generation in the story room, and that's what's great about being invited to the party. You're at the table, and nobody tell you you cannot voice anything, so people start speaking up, and we keep supporting each other. In our story room, we would call out, if someone were to give an idea, and I would say, oh, what McKenna said, or what Carrie said, just calling out the name so they feel like they're being heard, and not because you're young and your ideas are not valid. I feel like we just have a voice. Yeah, a voice, and the playing field is equal. You can say things, or you cannot, that kind of thing. Because I feel like no one is stopping us. But I do definitely feel like when you don't see a lot of the same people in your room, you don't know if you should speak up or not, even though the guideline was definitely not there that you cannot say anything, but you would just feel unsure. So I think it would take some time, but it's happening.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the biggest difference, like the combination of technology and voices, in terms that the new technology allows us to share our voices without anyone telling us like that's wrong. So yeah, in the old days, I guess there was always gatekeepers or big barriers to for someone to tell stories, and now we can do anything we want with the barrier of entry to telling stories is so low now that anyone can share. And since that gatekeeping thing of the stories that are being told has always been skewed towards one particular type of person, that it's like white male stories. Now those who are not on that category can just like tell our stories, and nobody can tell us that it's wrong. So now we have like so much diverse stories, and I think that started with our generation probably.
Maybe something that is interesting is that people that are approximately my age or a bit older, like around 30, that grew up like me with Japanese animation and a lot of really mixed inspiration, also MTV, internet, a lot of things. Now, some of them, they have the experience to try and do animation for adults, for example. So with serial TV, like something like Last Man. I will speak for France, not for the worldwide, because I know France better. But it's been a long time that a lot of people, and also producers, are willing to do something other than animation for kids. And it's really, 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 really hard to produce something like that and to have it broadcast. But I can really see now it's really not so much people, not so much project, but this last year it started to grow. So you have satirical cartoon and also serialized cartoon, and it's quite new. And I know that a dream for a lot of people working in animation in France would be to work on this kind of project, not only in animation for kids.
So the pushing, you said?
For me, regarding the change that maybe is already visible, I think what I guess, because I've always known it like this, that studios and teams which I worked on were very international, especially in Europe, where it's easier to travel and the working permits, where that was for me always incredibly enriching, just to have lots of different young people from all over the place coming together and then making hopefully cool stuff. So that's something that I felt, okay, that's a combination of the world being more globalized and everybody having a stronger connection with everyone, so that also you can imagine just working with each other more easily. And I think for the future, when you say, okay, 75% of the workforce are going to be millennial or younger, then I think if it coincides with some economic changes, then it's a huge chance for all the countries where all these young people come from. So if you combine like a young population and maybe you have an economic situation where it's possible to make animation in some context, then maybe some things will shift over the next years and decades, where the strong animation talent and where the strong animation industry maybe comes from. I don't know, maybe the next Nora Tomy comes from Vietnam, or the next David O'Reilly comes from South Africa. It's like because there's lots of young people there, and maybe there's going to be an economic environment to support that. So we'll see.
Well, speaking of internationality, I think it's very good also to take any opportunity you have to go and live in a different country for a little bit. I know Erasmus exchange and things like that. Like I had the opportunity to go to UK and then CalArts in California, and it really helps you understand also from where you come from. Just like bringing your own nationality against, no, not against, but like with others. It's very helpful, like to open your minds and share ideas, and really it helps you understand you, even your identity of like what you are as a French. I remember, for instance, well, as French for me, yeah. In one of my first jobs in America, for instance, I remember the leader who wanted, like I had the interviews, like everything went well, but then I found out later that he had second thoughts of hiring me because I was French, and I didn't know. Apparently we have some attitude and it was so weird. I'd never heard that before, and in the end he took me, it all went well, and he hired more French people after that, but it's funny how
Model citizen.
yeah, I think so.
Represent.
She broke the French stereotype or something.
But it is, but there is a French stereotype, though. It's true, like the attitude is part of it, but I've never heard it like in a work environment, so it's the only time that I heard that, but it went well after.
I think it's like from what you said, it's important for someone to take risk
represent, like
on unlikely, talent from unlikely place, which I think, like for example, like Brandon hired me, so I was able to move to LA, and even though I was foreigner, and he was like, okay, we're gonna work with your situation, and like I'm grateful for that, because I feel like it doesn't happen every day, and I know there's a lot of leadership in recruitment here in this room, so I want to encourage you guys to look outside the box. Maybe there's someone that might not be to where you usually look for talent.
Yes, please, I need a visa.
This panel has taken a different turn. No. But I think you all are reflecting something really interesting, which is the idea of our generation and those younger than us, to even a greater degree, are really accustomed to the change in pace of technology, accelerating year over year. We know that's what's happening, right? It's causing us to have, and you were all reflecting on this in different ways, a sort of global mindset inherently, because we're interconnected through the internet. There's no way not to be. We're sort of gone there and we can't go back, right? And that's inherently diverse and inclusive in really interesting ways, from a storytelling standpoint, from an opportunity standpoint, from the idea, even perspectives, that low barrier to entry you were talking about. And with that, like, same idea in mind, as you continue to grow in your careers, you obviously have all been working on films or made films that have had high impact in the marketplace. What stories are you excited about telling, or stories you think should be told or hope are told in the next 10 to 15 years, or even shorter amount of time given technology? How are you looking outward at the stories that you hope are in the marketplace or coming to you, just especially given that global context and the global connection?
I love themes about humanity and what brings us together just as humanity. I always loved all the films about like history or science, biology. I don't know if some of you know Il était une fois la vie. I used to love that show.
We had it in Germany as well.
Oh, how do you say it in German?
Es war einmal ... whatever. Das Leben, or, Sorry, didn't want to.
No.
But it was great. It was great.
I loved all these kind of shows, and I
loved the designs.
It's like little cells and stuff. Yeah. Like explaining how it works inside your body, like through all these little stories and characters. And I hope we keep developing this, and just everything that brings us human, societal themes, all of it. Something interesting that's arising these days is also artificial intelligence, and weirdly, I think it might bring us together as humans too, because we're gonna face this thing like all of us as one. So it's a theme I'd like also to explore, and because we have like technology, like Black Mirror, all these films are really dark, but also it would be good to see something that could be a little more positive.
Yes,
like
please.
We're very dark ages. I know we're not like.
Yeah, but it's true that. When it comes to the outlook into the future and how technology, changes, what humanity is all about, and as you said, it's like the fabric of our societies has changed a lot in the past years, and it's gonna change even further. And everyone has to have so much more stuff in their mind because of the information, the million bits of information that you mentioned before. It's just gonna change how, not necessarily how hard our life is, but maybe how complex it is. So I think that's always the difference. Like when old people ask me, like, so Bernard, what is the difference between, like, how's your life as a young person? It's like, it's not harder than your life was back then, you know. But it's just more complicated
And our attention span
Yes,
is getting a
yes,
little...
So yeah, I hope that people will make stories about it, deal with the change of humanity, and hopefully something slightly uplifting.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of dystopian sci-fi,
But,
real big fan. I love the Black Mirror.
but you need a bit both, right?
It would be
But-
nice to have something that's not completely depressing. Yeah.
By the way, you got a nice reaction of no, it's not more complicated from some people in the audience. So I think there's even a debate about what complexity means. Maybe it's just different, the shape that it takes for us. That's an interesting piece
okay.
of the puzzle. Yeah, the complexity might just be different or implicated in different ways with technology, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the kind of stories that don't give you all the conclusions that you're supposed to feel. You can talk it out, start a conversation. I feel like in some ways Zootopia was doing that, and I was like, oh, it's an animation for, it looks so cute and adorable, and looks like for kids, and then you go and you come out, and there's something to talk about afterwards. And I hone in on those kind of stories, and also because I live in different cities throughout the time of my life, and I find that even though we look different or we have different background, we have more in common than we realize. So I want to, I guess it's kind of like globalization a little bit, but it's true. And what you find, the common ground is what brings us together. So those kind of stories always speaks to me.
Yeah, I'm a little obsessed with a single theme. I guess if you check my work, it's always related to that a little bit, which is like being a workaholic woman. And so my last short film was like about this couple that wanted to make cupcakes on their own bakery, and they end up with like normal jobs and start drifting apart from their dream. And she was very workaholic. And now I'm making a series about like teenagers who want to be Olympic athletes. And that's like the closest thing to a workaholic you can be while in school, I guess. So it's like I'm still like processing through my work what it means to be like a woman with very high ambitions, very high career ambitions, because like I guess growing up, I only saw like the male version of that. So it's weird because you don't think about it like in a conscious way. But it always has felt like wrong to be ambitious. And I think when I saw Zootopia, I thought if I would have seen this movie when I was little, because Judy is so like go-getter, I would have had that feeling that it was wrong in some sort of way to be like an overachiever. So yeah, I'm still like working out like how does it look to be that as a woman like in my work, and also recently I'm like trying to explore that by being Latina, because I didn't really thought about too much about being Latina in my previous work. I never thought about it because it sounds weird, but Chile doesn't, as a country, doesn't seem to relate to the rest of Latin America, that they don't like to be thought of as Latinos, but it's weird because we are. It's like, it's weird. But yeah, and it wasn't until I made my last short film and sent it to festivals and tried to make it like reach the world, the rest of the world, it proved really difficult. And I found myself that I had like this Latino glass ceiling, and I finally could identify a lot with the hardship of being that. And now this series I'm talking about is about Latin American teenagers, and that will be in my work. And now I think I do have a responsibility to take Latino stories into mainstream media. Something I didn't felt before, but now, like seeing those statistics, it's really important. So yeah.
I agree on the responsibility thing because it's really easy to hypnotize people with a moving picture and sound. And we have this big responsibility because telling a story is just a transmission of meaning and of information. And I also agree on the science fiction anticipation thing. It's my favorite genre. But whether it's a science fiction or not, I would really like to see more and more animation or film that ask the question of what is going on now and where we are going as a humanity, because the world is changing really fast, and in some way that we don't have so much control about a lot of changes that are happening now, and it would be really nice that this aspect of thing would be on the back of the mind of more and more people, so we can kind of prepare, we'll start to feel natural to talk about it. And yes, I think it's crucial. We cannot imagine how the world will look in 30 years, but when we start to read about climate and other different subjects, it's so crazy that you cannot picture it.
So how are we even imagining the world that we're building?
Yes.
And our generation's sort of responsibility is part of that. Yeah.
So for example, we know for climate change, it's already kind of too late to have like a 2 or 3 degree rise. And if we want to save a lot of places, to have still be able to live in Africa in 2 centuries and and to not lose all the coasts on the Europe and USA, we have to act like within 10 years now. And it's really unlikely that it's going to happen. So I think it's a dimension that is really, really interesting. Even as a storyteller, the gap, the conflict is so big that if you want to tell a story that are really primal and visceral, you can go in this way. You will find so much thing to say and to explore that it's really inspiring too, just from a creative standpoint.
I think when you think about all of those things intersecting, I threw this question to you all because I think vocabulary is changing because of it. Like vocabulary of even how we talk about, I was talking a little bit about intersectionality. It's one of the themes of the day with inclusion. And the vocabulary of even how we're talking about the ideas of storytelling, representation, what we're tackling, who we are, Fernanda, you just even, shared your journey of even identifying as Latina and what that meant and that, that opportunity that presented itself. With intersectionality being the idea that we are many identities in one person, it's something that I think is very much growing in the consciousness of how we talk about our work and ourselves, and that we're a combination of things. How do you see the conversation, as part of even some of these larger conversations around storytelling, how do you see that conversation around identity evolving in our generation and this industry and sort of maybe even manifesting itself in storytelling? Are you seeing some changes in even how, in story, of even how people are sort of tackling? I think Zootopia is a really interesting example because it was tackling bias kind of head on, but in a way that was super creative and using, what were essentially animals, in a sort of, in almost a kid-like way. Have you seen any other things that have sort of sparked you in that way? Or would you like to see? Yeah. Yeah, go, fine.
I guess I was just looking at like when you talk about intersectionality of where like you are many things, right? I look at friends and family, and I saw a lot of like the scope of family of the next generation. There's a lot of like interracial going on. Someone that is not one thing or another, and especially my daughter is someone of a mixed race baby, and I was looking at her thinking like, this is the future, our future now, that people travel, live in different countries, they met and they create this next generation, and I just wonder what kind of conflicts she's gonna run into. Would she ever think of like, am I this or am I that? And even me living in the States for almost, in a few years it will be the same equal number of years when I was living in Thailand. So when that year's hit, I'm gonna have some crisis of like, who am I? Where do I belong? So I think globally that is also like an emerging topic. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I was just thinking that that is in the air already. And I won't be surprised that there will be a story being told about that.
I was thinking, I'm not sure how to answer the question also, but I was thinking about the correlation between the story that's being told and who is telling it. And we could say that the representation on the TV screen could be like very, getting the numbers aren't depressing as much as before. But now, after those numbers keep increasing, we have to like start seeing who is telling those stories. Because I think it was a quote from Ava DuVernay that she said that if like a white filmmaker tells a story about black people, it's an interpretation, and that is nice. But if a black filmmaker tells a story about black people, it's a reflection, and it could be much more powerful for that segment. So I'm not saying that only women can tell woman stories and only black people can tell black stories, but I'm saying that since that gap is so big right now, we have to work on closing it until it's more balanced.
Anybody? Okay. No, but I think it's a really interesting point because that's also the conversation around, authentic. Like, what does it mean to tell authentic stories, and how is that even being defined today? Especially as identity, Fawn, even talking about your daughter, is changing and molding in these different ways, right? Because in the future, there's a version of somebody is not just continues to not be just one thing, right? So you could identify as Latina and Black, and mixed, and LGBTQ, whatever the categories, and suddenly. What does that even mean in implication of story, right? Is it like, what's the reflection if it's so many different parts of your identity, and what does that mean for story? I think is a really interesting part even of what you're breaking down in that statement you just shared with us. I'm wondering, sort of pivoting on that, because we're all, I think, would identify as multiple things on a daily basis. Fawn, you talked about this a little bit earlier, and I wanted to pull the thread a little bit on it, which is, you were talking about being in a room and feeling, sometimes not that it's been said that you can't speak, but that there might be a moment where it feels harder to speak because you're the only one, or you don't see yourself in that space. And so I wanted to pull on that a little bit for everybody, which was, is there a time, even especially as we think about our generation, which is obviously more diverse statistically, and we're more globally connected and all of that, are you seeing changes in the rooms that you're in terms of who's there, how you feel in terms of empowerment in that room? And then do you think that, are there still moments where you feel like the only one? And what does that mean for you? So 2 questions. Are you seeing changes in the dynamics of the rooms you're in terms of speaking up? And do you feel like still at any given moment you're the only one in a particular room? And what does that even mean, given that we're kind of multiple ones at any given moment in time?
Well, I could start with just personal experience, because I've worked in London most of my work time. It did still happen that I arrive in a studio and it was only male directors, and I was the only female person. I wasn't even a director yet, but there was nothing discriminating. They were always very nice, encouraging me on my work, and I know they were trying to encourage me to become a director in that studio, and I didn't take the opportunity. Maybe I felt very pressured because I knew I was the only one maybe, and they expected so much from me, and I ended up not being really ready or confident enough to do it back at that time. And it got me thinking after, because I always think it's a personality thing, but maybe it comes from like a lot of different like bias thing, like how we grow up and how we're not seeing ourselves represented in like all the directors, and we unconsciously don't picture ourselves up there. And
imposter symptom.
Imposter syndrome. It's something. Yeah, it's
Yes.
crazy because we don't feel we're capable of doing it. And I've reflected on it like years after, and still trying to figure that out. It's interesting. Like in the past 2 years, I think I've never been like more open to talk about like bias, unconscious bias, and all of that. So it's really opening, making us think about even our choices and all of that. So it's really great. I think there's a big progression in that. And even in London, there's so many studios like that required 50-50 female-male animators. I think it's a strange beast. I don't, or even Wednesday studio, like that got created by women themselves. So I think things are really changing, and people are aware. Even in that studio that I work with, now they hired female directors, and it's starting to change. They're all aware of like the situation. So I think it's getting better, really. Like I've never had any other problems in that. They're always being very encouraged female to really take the lead and all of that. I've always felt pushed in that direction. So positive experience on my end.
It really helps having female leadership that you can look at and draw inspiration from.
Relate to.
Yeah, like at work we have Jennifer Lee, and Josie Trinidad was my head of story on Zootopia, and she had a baby, like newborn baby, when she just became head of story. And looking back now that I had my own baby, I'm like, how is that even possible? How did she do it? It's so hard. But to see those people speaking up in the story room and just kind of like own it and you know, and people be receptive of their thoughts made me feel like, oh, maybe my thoughts are not crazy after all. And it's important to be invited, even to be invited to the party, like you said earlier, to get your exposure in the room. Because a lot of times I feel like I'd have some thoughts and I was too afraid to say it, and then someone in the room would be saying the exact same thing, and everyone was like, yeah, and I was like, oh, I thought of that too. So over time, through exposure, I think that's really important that people start.
Now you would speak
Yeah,
first,
no,
right?
feel like I can say what I think, 'cause I can trust my instinct maybe, and that over time, I think really with experience, then you feel more comfortable.
Well, I have thought about that like in two categories. Like I think it's different for when they include you as a team or as part of a team, and when you become leadership. Because like when you get inserted in a team as the only one in that room, as maybe like to be in a lesser position, or like, oh yeah, we can teach her, like it's less intimidating for them. But then you become the director, and you can sense problems from the team if that's not if they're not used to, for example, having a woman director. In my experience, at least, I sensed that difference. Like when I was part of a team, it didn't bother them, like, because it was like, oh, we'll teach her, that's cute. But then when I was director, it was like, oh, like I got complaints with like the service studio I was working with. Like I was too demanding. I had very high standards, and I thought, but they have made like high quality work before. Why is mine so difficult? Like why is mine my standard getting so much complaint? And then it was a team that I didn't pick, and when I did work with a team I did completely pick, they told me like be more demanding, like please tell us what do you want us to do to bring this to your standards. And so I felt that difference, and I can't 100% for sure say it was gendered, but I do feel it was gendered. So yeah, because I had I had the same, on the same project, I had both experience and I could compare them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You go
yeah.
on.
Well, in my case, I think I've been very lucky throughout my professional life that there weren't really any instances where I thought like I'm the only one in the room and I cannot say things or I cannot or that I was in some way antagonized for whichever reason. So I feel I was very lucky. Maybe I didn't sense it because sometimes, usually I'm the only Asian, German, half Chinese, half Filipino, quarter Chinese, quarter Vietnamese, Bavarian in the room. So usually I'm the only one.
I mean,
So there might be unconscious biases, and maybe I'm biased as well, but I've never felt it like very openly. The only thing that sometimes happens is, of course, that you know there's some preconceptions about Asians being a bit more timid or a bit more shy, and sometimes you would get the feeling that okay, maybe they're not waiting for me to actually say something or to participate. But that's, I don't know, it's like I don't want to complain since I never felt like really left out or something. So in the professional life, I think I've been very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, the same for me. I was since I started. It was 8 or 9 years ago. I was always backed up by men, because most of the storyboarders I met were men. The director were all men, so I work with men, and they always push me, taking me seriously, express gratitude. I think I was really lucky. I met some really, really cool humans, and so I cannot.
cool humans, everybody. That's the name of the game today. Cool humans. Yeah.
Be excellent.
Yes.
But I never really felt. Of course, sometimes you feel like that your gender is provoke a reaction, but it wasn't bothering enough for me because I know I had people on my side. So even when some people went and bothered me, I didn't feel so threatened. It was, of course, a bit annoying, but I could deal with it because I knew that that at worst case I could just turn back and just say, okay, this guy is really not properly behaving, and I know that people that were working with me would do something about it. So I didn't have to do it. I just could deal with stuff myself, and I mean, I think whether you're a girl or a man, you will always have this kind of problem anyway. So I was lucky. I didn't really have this problem.
Well, it's pretty awesome what you just talked about, which is going to be the subject of the panel this afternoon, which is around allyship and male allyship. So you had, men who were sticking up for you and, pushing you forward, which is a really important part of the whole conversation. I think we end up talking about gender in a way that we focus on female identity, particularly. Again, we're all many things, and that we have to have that cross-gender conversation, because really at the end of the day, it's about cool humans, right, helping each other. And that's, it's interesting because you say it that way, because I think that's something that feels very much in the zeitgeist for us generationally too, is this idea of, we want people who are cool humans to be around us, and that there's a sense of, at the end of it, that's how we're going to make it in this crazy world that we were outlining throughout the panel. And I'm wondering, I think this is a really important thing you bring up, and I'm wondering, as we think about people, and I pose this question to you because I think it's interesting. I think a lot has been, let's put it this way, a lot has been said about millennials, about how we are. And I'm really curious, what advice, I say this with a grain of salt, what advice, as we think about the fact that allyship is happening, things are moving and changing at a rapid clip, both technologically, story-wise, in inclusion. I think the way we're thinking, even in everybody sharing in this panel, has been really different and has kind of brought up several different things. What advice would you give to people who are trying to understand us as millennials in terms of either leading us or working with us? And as you look to the generation that's coming right behind us, what are you seeing as opportunities, or what are you seeing that they're doing that's inspiring you? Because I take a lot of inspiration from the people that are even younger than we are. And so I'm really curious, what advice do you have for people who are looking at us and going, you know, trying to understand us, and then how are you sort of understanding the people that are behind us? It's a meaty one, I know.
Hard question.
Yeah.
Well, I think millennials have a very bad reputation because they tell us like, oh, you're so lazy for wanting job flexibility, and no, you are so idealistic, and blah blah blah. And I think the advice will be like, embrace it. Like, I mean, in terms that I myself felt very bad. Because it was like, oh, maybe I'm so entitled for wanting things to change. Maybe I'm so self-centered to want to tell stories about Latino virtues, stuff like that. And then it's like, no, because all of that is coming from a place of wanting to change what's not right with the world. So we are non-conformist, I guess, in a nutshell. So it's, embrace that non-conformativity of wanting things to change and demand better things and better conditions in all aspects, in climate change and workplace and family and diversity and everything.
Yeah, it's true. We might be the generation that takes time to really speak about all that. It's true. Like, we want to have even feel good at work as much as it will increase the productivity and the ideas too, just to be good in your workplace. And it's something we really want to focus on in our generation. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Advice as on an art side or just human side?
Either way, or both.
Well,
Yeah.
it's always, I think, my only advice is always to have a sketchbook with you, not just to make pretty drawings, but really try and understand what your voice is, note all your references. There's a great book about that called Steal Like an Artist. Yeah, it was really mind opener to be aware. Take all the references that you can get, and it's sometimes very difficult in our generation because everybody posts online, and you can feel the imposter syndrome when you see all the amazing drawings that you see on Instagram and all of that. But we have to keep in mind that everybody struggles. All the bad drawings are not shown online, and everybody just chooses
What?
to
People don't put their bad drawings or images online?
I think it could help a lot of people realize
Yes.
that we should do that. We should start Instagram with just bad drawings. But I think it would really make people understand that we're all struggling, and we're proud to share only what we choose. Just like on Facebook, when you share pictures of your life and the good sides of what you want to show, it's exactly the same in drawings. And I felt discouraged so many times, being like, why am I doing this? So many people that could are so much better than me. What am I bringing? And all of that. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And having a sketchbook, just writing anything bad drawings, you don't care. It's for you. It's really trying to embrace and discover who you are. And it's helped me. I've started that 2 years ago, and it's great. And I have no memory, so it's just great to go through it and get reminded of what themes you like and all of that. So that's my advice.
Good.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot being said about millennials, and it's from people who they're trying to understand it. I guess that's how I take it, because I'm like, that's cool, you're trying to understand what this different generation is all about, but I feel like there's nothing bad about following your passion. It's a generation that wants to put themselves into their work, and I feel like if they know that about us and they can tap into that, make us feel like our voice is being heard, that you can put yourself into the story you want to tell, especially at Disney we have a story room full of story artists, and we're trying to put ourselves into what we draw, and I feel like that can empower our generation of finding the place. And instead of, I think someone was mentioned earlier, of putting the characters in there that is not normally represented. But if that's your reality, then there's nothing strange about that. That's just how I know my life to be, or how I know my friends to be. And with that, there can be like a shift in content that I think will be received worldwide in a different way, in a better way.
It's really hard to answer this question because I don't know what it was before. Because in France, like 75% of animation workers are maybe under my age. It's really, really young industry. I used to work in UK, and there was the average age was much more older, with people who had families and stuff. So it's really hard for me to try to analyze what is different with us and compared to the previous generation. Only thing I observe for sure is you cannot tell people do this and do it, and not explain why it's a good choice. Because if you try to impose by authority, the production is going to be a mess really, really fast. People start to talk, everybody start to be sad and not happy, and people start to socialize around the negative feeling. So it's really important to maintain that motivation and meaning. But maybe it was like this before, I don't know. But this is a really important point that I could observe as a team leader. And it's really hard also to give advice for the younger, except from just work a lot. And if it hurts, it's normal.
Yes.
If it hurts, it's normal. And we're putting all our bad drawings online. That's basically, yeah.
That's gonna hurt very
Yeah.
much. I think, like, for me, it's very hard to give good advice for the future, because we said, okay, like both in life in general, but also in our art form, in our industry, in our medium, things are changing and are continuing to change faster and faster. So what brought us here won't necessarily bring you there, I guess. So I'd really hate to give bad advice here, and then someone later on comes to me and says, "Hey, but you said." Like, so unfortunately, I'll have to say that I think you'll have to be really vigilant and really look at the things and see how life is and how it's changing. I see that oftentimes when I talk with my father, because he gives me advice, and it's like, yes, I know that was applicable back then in the 50s, but now it's like a little bit. So I think we'll have to get used to the changes and the process of change, and have to reevaluate all the things all the time, which is a lot of work and it hurts, but it's probably normal. So I can't give very concrete advice. Only one wish is that be a cool human, you know. That'd be excellent. That's the only thing I can say.
I got asked a lot from students in Thailand of like, what do I do to get to work in a big studio in America and stuff like that? And I feel like now is time to even, ask yourself, like, what do you want to do with this creative voice that you have? There's so many platforms, and it's thinking about working at the studio strictly, is that an old way of thinking? And I mean, I'm at the studio environment, and I feel inspired by people I work with, but I feel like for people who feel like that's such a distant goal that they might not be able to be there, whether it's economic status, or not everyone can go to school at whatever place that they wanted to. But I feel like there's so many platforms that you can express yourself creatively and be heard, and to set your goal at working at a certain place is not always the answer. Now it doesn't.
I think that's actually really beautiful note to end the conversation on, which is, what I think, Vinhan, you said it really well, which was what has taken us here won't get us there, and that there's a reality to that. It's been a theme through the whole conversation, which is change is imminent, it's rapid, identity is changing, stories are changing, the way we interact with each other, it's global, we're collaborating, And even the way we're defining ourselves is changing as part of that. And I think it's really beautiful, Fawn, the way you ended there on the idea that then it's about what stories do I want to tell and where are the best mediums to tell those stories. And it may not be the way that it's always been done, but there's a room for that. And there's also room, it's like a yes and. There's room for that, and there's room for so many other ways to do it. And not to be stuck in maybe the mores of something else that you've believed, but actually think, oh, there's something I can express or do. And I think that's a really beautiful theme for everything you shared today as we think about our generation, the next generation, and those behind us that are moving forward, and that we can take from today, on top of being a cool human and making sure to share those bad sketches online so that we all know we're cool humans who are flawed.
It will hurt.
Yeah, and it will hurt. Great. That's a wonderful note to end on. But with that, I really want to give a round of applause to our amazing panelists for that discussion. Thank you so much. Solène, Fernanda, Binhan, Hélène, and Fawn. Thank you so much. Quick note, we're going to break now for lunch. Please be back in the room at 1:45. Please be back in the room at 1:45 so that we can all mingle and get seated on time for the next panel, which will be our Male Allies panel moderated by the fantastic Mark Osborne. Thank you all so much. Enjoy lunch.